Well, right now, President Trump and Vladimir Putin are locked in a face-to-face showdown that could finally end the war in Ukraine. The working lunch with the expanded delegation has not started yet, and the Kremlin says the talks could last for a minimum of 6 to 7 hours. Bret Baier was on Air Force One with President Trump, and here's a preview of that interview airing at 6 p.m.
So what are your expectations? I mean, is the goal of this meeting in Alaska to walk away with a ceasefire?
I'd like to see a ceasefire. I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it, but everyone says you're not going to get the ceasefire. It'll take place on the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be but I'm not going to be happy with that. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire.
Now, Bret Baier joins us live from Anchorage, Alaska. Bret, great to see you. And you've been on Air Force One a number of times, but it looked like today you had some special access.
Yeah, I definitely did, Katie. Great to see you and all of you. Usually whenever I traveled on Air Force One, I was back in the pool section where the reporters sit. Today was a little bit more up front, as I'm showing you there on the hallways next to the cabinet room, and the office obviously was the place for the interview. And listen, the president says he really wants a ceasefire. He'd be not happy if it wasn't a ceasefire. I don't think he'd be happy with the Kremlin's characterization of 6 to 7 hours. He's not ready for 6 to 7 hours of this. I think he wants to get an assessment of Putin, really see if he can get something done, and then move on to the second meeting whenever they can schedule that, and hopefully soon. I just want to point out that the biggest moment, and Air Force One is just over my shoulder here in the back at Elmendorf Richardson, the biggest moment here was when the two leaders walked out, and at that moment they shake hands and walk down the red carpet, and then the B-2 bomber flies over. And just the imagery of that and the sound, they both look up at it, and then to think that just recently, weeks ago, B-2 bombers made that 36-hour trek from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri to drop bombs, bunker buster bombs on the Iranian nuclear facilities. It carries a message, and it carried a message, I think, today, symbolically.
You know, Bret, it's so amazing to watch these images and to think, this meeting hadn't been on the books that long. It was only a 6-hour flight, and apparently about an hour of it was taken up with talking to you. It's amazing the amount of stagecraft that goes into this stuff, and you can't help but wonder, because it is so on point, as it always is with Trump. Is all this stagecraft completely directed by him personally? Did you get a sense of how much of an effort went into that?
Charlie, I think you're north of 80%. He talked about calling up the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and saying, I want these F-22s and the B-2 and a flyover, and all of that was in his mind. I mean, he is not only a real estate developer, but also a TV guy who I think plays for the dramatic moment, and he created a dramatic moment. Now, if he's creating the moment behind the scenes like he created in front, they could have some success here. I'll tell you, there was this sense of optimism, guys. There really was this, and I've listened to the pessimism, and maybe Putin is not a guy to trust ever, but the president really thinks that Putin's back is up against the wall economically, and that he eventually wants to get out of this war.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you about, Bret. You had unprecedented access to the world's most powerful man before this all-important summit, sitting there together on Air Force One. We've seen clips already throughout the day. In about 39 minutes, we'll get to see the interview on Special Report. But give me a sense of his attitude. I hear you saying he was optimistic. Did you give me a sense on, I know he wants to find a second meeting, and he needs a framework to get to that second meeting. Do you have any details at all of what that could mean for President Trump?
Well, we talked in the last hour about how much setup really went into this, and obviously the drama and painting the picture all went to Trump. But, he sent Steve Witkoff, his negotiator, who has been dealing with the Middle East, but also with Russia, 6 times. And there were personal meetings with Putin. They got along. The chief negotiator on the Russian side talked nonstop to Steve Witkoff, to the point where I talked to him on the plane. He said he talked to the guy, the Russian, yesterday, 6 times yesterday, as they were setting this up. So it's hard to believe that they don't have some framework heading in. to get somewhere. And whether they can get there without either one walking away, we're now almost at 2 hours behind the scenes. So one would think it's at least moving forward.
Awesome. Hey, Bret, it's Jesse. Awesome. Fabulous coverage thus far. The plane looks awesome. I have never been on there. I've been on the TV screen on there, but not live. I'm curious if you have a sense of how President Trump is feeling about Zelensky at this moment, if all fences have been mended from the Oval Office blow-up, and if he is really in sync with the other NATO partners right now in terms of what they're looking for if we can get to a deal.
Yeah, that's a great question. But first of all, I want to point out that I asked the Hillary Clinton question.
I know, and I DM'd
from your
you
podcast.
saying, you rock. That was so generous of you.
Okay.
And if she has to nominate him for a Nobel, we are all going to die, basically.
Okay. That's right. It's a great question that you ask. I think he had a number of good meetings. He had a great meeting with Zelensky in the Vatican. He had a couple of great phone calls where, in his words, they were really succinct and kind of he thought he got through to Zelensky. But then Zelensky came back and said, as they were getting push comes to shove of what he's willing to do, that he didn't have the constitutional authority to talk about land swaps or how that was going to work. And, you know, the president got frustrated, saying, you've been at this for 3 years. I mean, why don't you have the authority to do that? So there was frustration. I don't think he, loves Zelensky as far as his interactions, but he appreciates what he's been through and the fact that he's held off the Russians for as long as he has. I think the bottom line is the president really wants to get this over with, like the war over with. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, the First Lady, Melania Trump, is instrumental in talking about some of the death inside Kyiv and has had an impact in talking about, after phone calls that were positive with Putin, the missiles hitting kids and women.
Yeah, that's also a story I'm sure we will see more of. Bret, watching your coverage today has been amazing. Thank you for giving everybody in the audience a view into these historic events today. Thank you very much.
You bet. See ya.
And be sure not to miss his interview tonight with President Trump at 6 o'clock on Air Force One. But here up next is 47 ready to drop the hammer on Russia if Putin won't end the war.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.